Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Lyons Real Estate Show. Today we're going to talk about that age-old question, that big debate. Should I buy or should I rent? And we're going to cover that in depth today.
You're on the burger business. You're in the real estate business. You're in the real estate business.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Please fasten your seatbelts.
All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, if you're on an Amazon device like Alexa, you know us as the Texas Real Estate Show. And if we're on iTunes or elsewhere, you know us as the Ron Lyons Real Estate Show. So thank you so much for tuning in. Today, that big, giant question: to buy or rent? And you're probably here, if you did a search on Google, you landed here because you're looking for an answer for yourself. So there isn't one specific answer that's a one-size-fit-all. That's, right off I need to tell you that. But there is different scenarios that you're probably similar to. And hopefully with a little bit of my thinking and a little bit of my guidance, I can help you determine for yourself whether it's better to rent or to buy. So let's just think about that for just a second. Most of the time, these scenarios are addressed from a strictly financial perspective. And that's fine, except for I've got a little different take on it than just that financial aspect. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. But as of right now, just understand that a lot of the research you can do approaches a decision from a 100% financial perspective, which is fine. If you're in a situation where the finances are the most critical element, then maybe that's your perspective. But there's something beyond that that needs to be addressed, and we'll get to that later on in the podcast. So I guess the best way to approach this is to basically take it like in scenarios, essentially. So I'm going to break down a handful of scenarios for you, and one of those is probably going to end up being very similar to your situation. So right after this quick break, we're going to just dive in a little deeper and see if we can give you a little glimmer of hope in figuring out whether you should buy or rent. Are you sitting there in this market just as confused as a goose in a snowstorm? If you are, then you're in good company, because that's how most people feel. They don't know whether it's time to buy. They don't know if it's time to sell. They don't know if they should hold on. It's just a big confusing mess, and there's so much conflicting information out there. So what I know is that there's not a single answer that applies to everybody in every situation. So I would like to help you figure out your situation. Of course, in order for that to happen, you've got to call me first. 214-783-5440, or email me at ron@ronlyons.com. And I assure you of one thing, and that is that my motivation is to help you. I would never tell you to sell if it's not time. I'm not going to tell you to sit there and wait if you need to move. I'm always going to give you my very best advice that comes from the heart. So reach out to me, give me a call, shoot me an email, and let's figure out your situation. All right, guys, let's dive into each one of these different scenarios and see if we can figure something out that's going to help you. So let's start off. Our basic scenario is going to be like your first time home buyer position. So it's someone who has probably started a family, maybe they've possibly graduated from college, and now the obvious thing to them, or the traditional thing, is it's time to buy a house. And I'm going to just tell you right now, in most of those cases, that's not the right time to buy a house. That's the right time to rent. And let me explain why. Most first-time home buyers are kind of in that category I was talking about. They're just starting out. They're probably very early in their career and not making the income that they will make later as the years go by. They're also probably in debt, especially student loan debt. And they're taking on all of these new challenges, including starting a family. So that is probably not the best time to go out and try and buy a home. That is a scenario that is probably 100% better geared towards renting. When you rent, you can do things like pay down that student debt. You can save money to put a down payment on a home. You can allow yourself to get a little more tenured in your profession or in your job so that you can start earning, more income. You can have your family a little more established. So in that scenario, a young person, a young couple, a young family, just getting started, just out of college, trying to kind of pursue that American dream of owning their own home, that is probably not the best time to do it. So I'm going to call the people in this scenario. If you are similar to this situation, I'm going to tag this one. You're a renter, or at least you should be for a while. So there's the first scenario. Now let's move into the second scenario. The second scenario is going to be somebody who is absolutely coming from that financial position, and it's all about just those numbers, and what they want to do is make money. So should a person who wants to make a lot of money, rent or buy? Well, you're going to make money in a lot of different ways. You're going to possibly make it with your employment, your career. You're going to make it through investments if you do investments. But how does that tie into buying a home or not? Well, it's like this. If you're trying to increase your personal wealth, chances are good that when you're in that stage, you need to cut your own personal expenses down as much as possible. And you need to take your purchasing power that you have and purchase a home or a multifamily type structure, maybe a 4-plex, an 8-plex, or a 12-plex, something like that, and then lease the property that you own while you yourself rent. So you lease the least expensive home possible. Maybe that's an apartment. Maybe it's a house, a condo, whatever it is. Maybe it is a home. But the point is, you rent that, you lease that, and then you use your purchasing power to buy a property that can have a very, very high return for you on the rental income from that house, something, or from that property that's going to have as low maintenance as possible, and something that you're going to very strategically purchase in an area that has a history and a projection for property values continuing to go up and up and up. So it's not that you're going to live inexpensively yourself and then buy a rental property that's just going to either sit flat or go negative in property values, but rather that you're going to live as inexpensively as possible and then use your purchasing power to actually buy a property that you can then lease to other people, with the idea being that you're going to have growing equity in that property, and you're going to have tenants or residents who live there that are actually paying you, covering your mortgage payment, covering the upkeep cost, helping pay those property taxes, etc. So it's a very strategic purchase that's necessary in a situation like that. But if your goal is to make money, then you probably want to live very, very thrifty, very, very conservatively, and use that purchasing power to find something that you can then lease out. And if you scale this over the years, or if you hopped into this in a scenario where maybe you're a little older, you've already made a fair amount of money, so you could afford to live in something a little nicer, but the idea, the concept is the same. Maybe at that case, you live in a more affluent area, a more expensive home, but instead of just having one property, maybe you have 20 units, maybe you have 20 properties, maybe you have 40 or 50. So it's all about scale and how making the proper purchase with this scenario can help you increase your wealth. When you decide to sell your home, one of the most important aspects of selling it is the photography. And why that matters so much is because most of your buyers are going to go to the internet and they're going to research homes. And if your pictures pop up of your home for sale that your real estate agent or your realtor took with their cell phone, then that first impression of your home is a terrible first impression. And most likely they're not going to come see your home. And your home may be wonderful in person, and maybe just the images don't do it credit. But the way around that is to actually have high-end professional photography done. Now, if you list your home with me, I'm going to include high-end professional photography for free. So keep that in mind. Give me a phone call, 214-783-5440, or email me at ron@ronlyons.com. Just remember, first impressions are critical. Don't let some really, really bad images of your home ruin someone's first impression. All right, guys, our final scenario is probably the most common scenario out there, and this is where most people are going to fit. So if you're not a first-time home buyer and you're not a person who is trying to utilize the buy versus rent option and leverage that to increase your personal financial situation to increase your wealth, then you're probably in this category. And what this category is what I call your person who wants to buy a home, but also wants to be 100% sure that financially it makes more sense than renting. And I'll just tell you, I'm not going to dive down deep into a bunch of crazy numbers because you're going to get so super bored with that. But I'll tell you this, when you rent and when you buy, for the first 2 to 3 years, in most cases, the renting is going to be the less expensive option. So for 2 to 3 years, it is true that you will spend more money purchasing a home than you will renting a home or renting an apartment or some property like that. And if that's as far out as you look, as if your perspective only goes 2 or 3 years, then I guess your decision's made. It's time to rent. But here's the thing. You're going to need somewhere to live most likely well beyond 2 to 3 years. So at that second or third year, typically it flips over and the cost of actually owning a home or purchasing a home drops down to under what the rent might be. And again, there are so many different factors in this because, you know, if you say, well, Ron, I'd go out and find an apartment for $350 a month, and the house I would buy would be $5,000 a month in mortgage payments alone. Well, of course, barring the extreme, if you're comparing an average decent rental to an average decent purchase, if we're staying in that same realm, then at about the second or third year, you hit break even, and then it starts to turn around and actually be less expensive to purchase. And there's a lot of online calculators that can help you determine this. You can put in all of your information I mean, down to the detail. You can put all of your costs associated with renting, like your renter's insurance, and the percentage per year that the rents are likely to increase in that particular market or decrease. And you can go through all of this detail, and it's always going to turn out the same way. Second or third year, break even, and then beyond that, you actually start to save money purchasing as opposed to renting. So that being said, that's a given. That's just the way it is, barring any exceptional cases. Let me get into what is the real core of this equation, the real middle of this decision-making process, because it's really, really, really important that you bring in this other factor that all of the financial people who are telling you, oh, you need to rent and rent forever and you're going to make all this money, ignore them. They have one goal, and that is to make money. And if that's your goal, then of course, hopefully you already hit the stop button on this podcast a long time ago. But here's the thing. You're purchasing a home. This is where you're going to do life and create memories. This is where you're going to wake up in the morning, step out on your porch, not one that you're borrowing from a landlord, but your porch. And you're going to have your cup of coffee. You're going to go out into your garden and you're going to plant your plants. You are going to go out and see the sunrise, the sunset at your home. Not at one that you're paying someone else to borrow temporarily with money that will never come back to you. And your increasing property value over time gets credited in a rental situation all to the landlord or to the owner. In your case, if you make a very strategic purchase in an area with a proven history of rising property values and projected rising property values, then you're going to be even better off. And in my particular market in North Texas, north of Dallas, that is absolutely the case. So think about that. I'm looking at a perspective that's completely different than just the financial part. You, of course, need to do your due diligence. Be sure that it makes sense financially to do. You don't want to go broke purchasing a home. I'm not advocating that at all. But if everything lines up and if it makes sense, then step into the next room in this and look all around there and think about it. It's your home. You will have Christmases there. You will have birthdays there. You will have so many different things. And at the end of the day, whenever it's time to move on, you have built up some equity. You actually have an asset that you can utilize to sell and put a down payment on something else, or to put away in the bank, invest it, and go back into renting. Or, heaven forbid, something happens to you. You have insurance that pays off your mortgage, and then you have an asset to leave to your estate. Something that you can pass on to your kids or someone else in your family. There is just more to this whole deal than looking at it from a financial perspective. If that's where you want to be, then move into something very inexpensive. Don't even think about buying a house, and do the best you can. Go out on your borrowed porch and watch that sunset from whoever's balcony that is that you're renting. Do your Christmases and try to make your, apartment or your rental home or your condo or whatever, try to make it look real homey. But realize that in 2 or 3 years, when you're in a different rental, there is no consistency there. There are no really, really good permanent memories that can be made. Chances are good that someone in your life in the past, a grandparent, somebody had a home, and you remember it very, very well. What if they were just moving around from rental property to rental property? I mean, you would still enjoy your time with them, of course, but it's so significantly different when you actually own a home and you can create your memories under that roof, within those walls, and then carry those forward for generations. So all I'm saying is that there is something well beyond just the financial perspective of this. Be sure that you give that its due time and consideration when you're thinking about, should I buy or should I rent? Anyways, guys, that's going to wrap it up for today. I hope you got something from this. Obviously, in 20 minutes, it's very hard for me to cover every single scenario, but maybe, hopefully, there's a little glimmer of something in this that can help you in your decision-making process. Anyways, guys, until the next podcast, be safe and God bless.
You're on the burger business. You're in the real estate business. You're in the real estate business.
The only thing we have to fear is
Please fasten your seatbelts.